Well, good morning, folks. Exciting times today. I've overhauled the front and rear calipers and the front and rear master cylinders. Now it's time to get the new brake lines on this bike and bleed the system. Now look, I can tell you I literally have been to hell and back trying to get brake lines for this bike. No, seriously. I've been to Hel Performance up in Caboolture, 40 kilometres north of Brisbane and back. Sorry about that. Rode up there, as it turns out, on my daughter's KTM 390 Duke to give it a bit of a run while she's been away, and was very impressed with the factory up there. The Hel is a British company, but they actually custom make all the brake lines as per manufacturer specifications on site. So these were custom made, and I was very impressed with the site up there and the guys who run it. Anyway, the job today is to get these brake lines back on the bike. I'm going to start with the front and then obviously go through the process of bleeding, priming the system with brake fluid and then bleeding any air out of the system so we have that lovely firm braking again, depending on whether it's front or rear brake. I'll get to it. Okay, well, let's start by having a look what I've got in the pack here. Oh, that was very clever. For brake lines of different lengths here. I presume the shortest one here is the one that goes over the mudguard at the front. And the longest one is probably, I suspect, the front here. Might be the back, actually. Actually, probably the quickest way to compare is to take the old cable off the front that goes from the front master cylinder down to the right hand caliper and just compare which one of these it matches with. And just looking at the angles of the heads, I think it's that one. Yep, that's it. So that's the one for the front master cylinder down. The little one is for the over the mudguard. That leaves the longest one, surprisingly, being for the back. Okay, so what else comes in the pack? There's a little bag of banjo bolts here. What do we got? The big double banjo bolt. That's obviously for the right hand caliper on the front. There'll be the front master cylinder, the caliper on the right hand side, the caliper on the rear here, and there's an extra one here because if you recall, the banjo bolt on the rear master cylinder is actually the one that incorporates the rear brake light switch. So one of these won't be needed, but that's fine. Now there's a stack of washers in there, aluminium crush, these look like copper crush washers. Of course, these go one either side of the brake line banjo. So looks like there's plenty in there. I think I'm all good to go. Okay, well, I'll make a start. So all of these banjo bolts are torqued up to 25 Newton meters, regardless of whether it's with master cylinders or calipers. So I'll grab my torque wrench. I'll set that to 25, so I'm ready to go, and we might set about firstly getting these brake lines all hooked up. bring him down through there. Okay, now the banjo on the over mudguard one goes on the inside of that, and it sits like that. So we'll set up the double banjo with a crush washer either side of each banjo. So I'll pop that one through, then a crush washer, then the other banjo from the other side. Set, then another crush washer. I'll just get that guy started once again. Hold him in place. Looks pretty good. Okay, we'll jump over the other side and sort the other one. Okay, come over this other side. And that guy's going to sit there like that. So I'll get a crush washer here. One of the new banjo bolts through the banjo. One for the other side, and we'll just position him in place as well. Okay, so that's all looking good. So I think we'll torque these guys up. Just do them up sort of finger tight first. There we are. Grab my torque wrench. There we are. Nice. I'll go back and torque the others up on the other side. .25 Newton meters. Finger tight first on the master cylinder one. Providing I've got enough room to get my torque wrench in here, we'll do him up as well, and we're underway. There we go, 25 Newton meters. We're in business. Okay, we've now got a closed system. Time to get our .4 brake fluid. Make sure you don't shake this up. Shaking it up is only likely to put air bubbles into it, which is the last thing you want. So get your .4 brake fluid that's been sitting quietly, and then we basically start to prime the system. Take the reservoir cap off. Basically we fill the brake fluid to between the max and the min level, and basically just start to crank the system. And bit by bit, take 20 or 30 brake clenches, and we'll start to work that fluid down. Okay, so now it's just a game of patience. I've covered the top of the reservoir here just to stop any muck getting into it. I've already topped it up a few times, so it's a game of gravity, and I've given a bit of an outlet here by just opening this bleed valve a little bit, hooking it up to a little flask here, and yeah, it's just a matter of patience, letting a mixture of gravity and a little bit of pressure take the fluid through the line and fill it up, which is our priming process. There's other ways to do it to speed it up. You can always reverse bleed. You could put a pump on here and actually a syringe and siphon some fluid in that way. Just got to be careful that when it gets up to your reservoir up the top, you don't bubble it out. Or the other thing is you can actually put a bit of a suction on here. Suction on your nipple and suck it through. But look, I'm just going to leave it gravity feed, and we'll come back and check on it a little bit later. It's been running for about 10 minutes now. Well, it's been about half an hour and starting to get quite a good flow through now. So basically the procedure is now the old-fashioned one, sort of give the system a bit of pressure, hold it in, then just crack open the valve a bit, and once it's sort of filtered out, crack the valve closed again, close the valve and release the pressure on the brake. Just continue to pump it through in the same way. Okay, so it's running pretty clear on the right caliper, so I've moved everything over to this side, and it's the same process. Just make sure your brake fluid's up high, put some brake pressure on the line, and just release the pressure on the bleed valve, close it off, then release pressure on this hand. So it's that whole process. Pressure on, open the valve, let some air bubble out. Once it sort of stopped moving, close off the valve, and release the hand again. So it's just that process. Keep going until you're not seeing any more air bubbles. So I can actually see, it's funny, these braided tubes, so I can actually see through them with a bit of light behind there. I actually see some bubbles coming over the top of the mudguard cable or the mudguard line. So anyway, I'll keep going with that, and yep, hopefully we'll get all the bubbles out of the line soon and get some pressure in there. Okay, squeeze the brake, release the valve, a few air bubbles coming through there, just about stopped, close the valve, release the brake pressure. And again, brake pressure on, open the valve, you still see a few bubbles coming through there, close the valve, release the brake pressure, and so on. Okay, well, I'm all done. It took me a long time. In the end, I had clear fluid coming out of both calipers, but I still had fairly spongy brakes. So I discovered I had an airlock in the master cylinder. So I ended up cracking off the banjo bolt on here a couple of times, pumping it up and then cracking it off, and psh, I got a fizz of air, released it again, tightened it up, pumped the brake up again, released it. Psh. So I eventually got the airlock out of here, and then it was back down to doing a bit more bleeding of this side, then bleeding the other side. Each time the actual brake lever took less and less pumps to get it up to full pressure, and felt like the system was firm. So now, after I bleed and let it out, 1 or 2 pumps and it's up to full pressure again. So I think the air level in the system is pretty minimal, if any. So I consider it fully bled. But anyway, it's been a long job, and it's, you know, it's well known as a tough job to fully prime and bleed a system from dry brake lines. So feeling happy that's done, but yeah, going to have to get on to the rear tomorrow. One last thing I'll say here is that if it's a bit of an old trick, if there's any residual air in the lines, I'm leaving the reservoir open just with a light cover over the top, stop stuff getting in there, and then I'm holding the brake lever tight with a zip tie overnight, and that can tend to have any leftover in the system just bubble up and dissipate out the top of the reservoir overnight. Often it's quite effective at this stage when you're almost there. In fact, you may well be there, but there could just be a couple of little pockets of air. So I'm going to leave that overnight with that zip tied up under pressure. We'll see how it is tomorrow. Okay, moving on to the back. Let's have a little bit of a close look at what we've got here. Okay, here's our rear brake line from Hel. It's actually a beautiful product, very well made, shrunk wrap right up to the end of the actual banjo. But these braided steel cables are really nice, and as I mentioned before, you can actually, in the right light, you can actually see bubbles of air moving behind that, so it's actually sort of clear, which is a bit weird. Okay, so I've got a banjo bolt here to go into the rear caliper, to hook the banjo into the rear caliper, and that's got a couple of copper cross washers. And the master cylinder here, obviously I've got the brake light switch banjo bolt combination there, plus a couple of crush washers to secure the other end of the brake cable here. So the brake cable, here's the old one I've just got hanging up there, runs around behind the shock absorber here, comes up. It's got a little bit of a protective covering there that I'll need to take off first, and then that just comes straight into the top of the rear caliper. So the first step will be to take this guy off, get rid of the old cable and reroute the new one. Okay. Not a lot of clearance over here. Just get a little Allen key. There we are, and I'll just extract that little protective covering there, put it somewhere safe, as per my usual way, put the screw back in there just to hold it so I don't lose it. So I can now continue to grab that brake line, detach it from both ends and pull it through. Okay, so the same process in reverse. Take my new Hel line, put it up around the back, and I'll firstly give that a little bit of a clean up the back. A little clean underneath the protective bracket. Tighten this guy up a little bit, at least hand tight for now. There we go. And we'll come through here to the other end and pop this one onto the master cylinder. So, even though Hel gave me a nice new little banjo bolt here, I don't need it, I just need its washers, new crush washers there. Same thing, one either side of the banjo. And then we'll torque that one up. Okay, I'm going to torque up this end though, because this one's not moving. Go. I just might torque him up that side as well. Done. Okay, so now I'm going to set up my overflow bucket down here, connect it up to the bleed nipple on the rear caliper. And see how I go trying to prime the system. Priming a dry system is always a challenge because of air pockets and getting them out. So I'll try first with the caliper in place and see if we can get some fluid through, get some nice undisturbed .4 brake fluid into here. I'll just open up that little bleed valve over here to create a bit of pressure release. It's got it, just cracked it open a bit. And I'll see how I go. I'll see if I can start to pump a bit of fluid through the system. Once again, be careful not to sort of disturb your brake fluid. Try and be gentle with it. You don't want to introduce any air into the system. And I'll just gently try and start pumping a little bit of brake fluid through the system if I can. There's also a lot of merit in just letting it sit, I guess. Gravity will sort of push its way down the reservoir tube into the master cylinder, fill it up from the bottom, and as it fills it up, it'll start to push air back along the hose, and hopefully to the point where it fills up the master cylinder and we can sort of pump it through. Yeah, as I said, if that doesn't work, I'll detach this rear caliper, put it down lower so gravity feed to prime it up will work even better. Okay, so it's working its way down there. Access to the top of that reservoir is pretty average. I've actually got the world's miniest funnel here that I'm going to use to help me. And pour some in again. Keep that topped up and then just keep working it through. Oh, and we're starting to get a little bit coming through, so that gravity feed's working quite well. Yep. So I'll actually tighten up that bolt again and we might start to do the more traditional bleed. Tighten that guy up. And the old pump this a couple of times. Some pressure in the system. Hold it down and crack that open. Bleed a bit through. Tighten her up again. And then release the brake. And again, hold that down, crack open the bleed, pulse of air through, pulse of fluid through, tighten it up again, release the brake. Mini funnel again. Now this little funnel came as part of a Russian doll kit of about 5 or 6 different funnel sizes. I never thought I'd actually get to use this bloody little thing. But anyway, it's quite useful for this. So look, it's flowing through really nicely. Let me just crank this up again. Getting to the point where about hold that down. It's got a bit of pressure in the system now. Crack that one open. Close her off and release the brake. So there's a bit of pressure coming into the system after 3 or 4 pumps. So we're on our way. I can feel that pressure drop out immediately when I open the bleed nipple. That's a good sign. Release that. And then to get that pressure back up again, 2, 3, 4. There we are, we're starting to get a bit of pressure into it now. Crack the bleed nipple and the pressure flows out. Tighten her up again. Release the bleed nipple, release the brake. Yep, so it's starting to work through the system quite nicely. Looks like I'm not going to have to crack that caliper off its mountings at all. There's a few air bubbles still coming out there, so I can tell by the number of times I need to pump it after I've released the pressure. There's still some air in the system, so it's just a patience game here now. Pump it up again. I can feel some pressure in the system. Hold it in, crack the bleed nipple, and there's some more air coming through again. Little bubbles now. Close her up, release the pressure in the system, and now build up that pressure again. There it is. Crack it open. There we are. More air bubbles coming through. Close her off. Release. So, still going to keep working through this process. A little bit further to go. every time I pump it up, I can tell that I'm getting closer to a fully pumped system. Okay, it's pumped up, hold the brake in, crack it open, tighten her up, release. Okay, it's starting to get pretty tight. I think I'm just going to go through one more vat of brake fluid, or reservoir full of brake fluid, and then we might be getting pretty close to money. You know what, I haven't seen a bubble coming out of there for the last 2 cycles, so I think I'm done. Brake pressure here is nice and strong. One other thing I just point out, just don't forget to keep an eye on your reservoir level when you're going through the cycling of your bleeding. If that goes dry, you could be almost on the point of having the system properly bled, and you'll hear a sound from up here, and you'll introduce air into the system again. So very important to keep an eye on your reservoir level and make sure it doesn't go below or lower. Anyway, I think we're there. That's feeling nice and tight. There's no bubbles in the system, so both back and front done. Okay, so the last bits, a few bits and pieces. Reservoir lid back on. Got my level filled up to the top. See if we can get this cover back on. Brake light. Now I've got no idea what the torque settings were for these, but it was pretty light. Then we'll just see if we can do them up here. As for anything in the plastic fittings, it's just a snug finger tight there. Do the same on this end. Okay, that's good enough for me. Last little bit, the nipple cap goes back on. And last but not least, my dodgy little boot. That's all degraded here on the switch. I'm going to pull him off. There we are. Goodbye to a 25-year-old boot, I would say. And hello to a brand new one. This is straight from, as you've seen, straight from Triumph, with all the names on it and the British flags, etc. And let's put a nice boot that's going to fit on there and stay forever. So, yeah, I'm actually going to have to detach that. Might take the opportunity to give that a little bit of a clean out as well on this brake light switch. But yeah, I'm going to have to displace those two to get it through. So once you've depinned that plastic connector, just take each of the wires individually and force them through the part of the boot. It's wide enough to get it through there with a bit of manipulating. Haven't made a bloody easy Triumph, that's for sure, but doable it is. There we are. So they're both through. Just pop that little boot up further over the okay, once we got our two little pins out here, we'll connect them back into the connector. Now, once again, take a photo of what's what and which pin goes into which one. There's a slightly different geometry on this pin. So the orange cable goes into the part of the connector that's got this little ridge on the top. So that's that one here. Just pop him in first and we should hear a little click. We're lucky. Yeah. And this one goes into that one. For the same little click. So it clicks into that. That's it. Nice little click there. And there's our boot. So connect that guy over to the top of the actual brake light switch. Just gently, don't force it. Whenever you're playing with these things, I think it's a good rule. Pull the boot over. Oh, no, it's around the other way. There we go. Oh, look at that. Oh, doesn't it look nice? Anyway, first time this bike had a nice, supple, new rubber boot on it since 2001, I'd say. Okay, perfect. So the final bit is just to reinstall the lid and the diaphragm onto the front reservoir. Tighten that up nice and firm after you've just checked you're up good level of brake fluid there. And lastly, it's got this little peg position clip and a clamp over the top, which just screws into the side of the reservoir to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Okay. Done. Okay, well, it's all done. After a 6-part video series, the entire braking system has been overhauled on this old Triumph Sprint ST. So, in summary, what were my big learnings? In terms of the master cylinders and the bleeding, beware of the airlocks in the front master cylinder, particularly in the fender overpass. That took a lot of time. The rear brake line was actually quite easy to bleed, to prime and bleed. Don't forget, when you're bleeding any motorcycle braking system or car braking system, keep a watch on the reservoir level. You can go to a lot of work efficiently removing air from the lines to actually suddenly reintroduce air when you forget to keep the reservoir levels up when you're bleeding, so don't forget that. Lastly, I guess this is just general advice from mechanicking. Take your time, research the right torques, settings, materials, and get the right advice. The old saying, measure twice, cut once, applies. You know, take your time. It's worth actually doing it all properly, because after all, when you get out on this bike on the road, you or someone else's life is riding on the line. So yeah, and there's a great satisfaction for me anyway in really taking a lot of care in all the elements. And it's not a race, but it is an opportunity to do a really good job, and that's really satisfying. What else? So what remains? I've got to reinstall the rear wheel and put the silencer back on, but then there's a multi-stage testing process for these brakes. The first one, I'll get it here on my rear driveway and just do some very, very slow speed checking that the brake actually holds. That's first stage. Second stage, well, before I go on to the second stage, I'll then look at all the brake lines and check all the fittings and make sure there's been no leakage. The second stage, I'll get out in my local area and do some very slow speed braking using front and rear. Once again, come back here to the garage, check everything over. If that looks good, I'll head out on the main highway and we'll give it a bit of a proper run. And the same thing, come back and check it all over. And I guess if it all looks good after that, I'll give it a tick and I'll say the braking system's done. So once again, the invitation's there. I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe it was useful to you. Anything, issues raised watching this, anything you've learnt you'd like to share with me, or you think I didn't know, or would you'd like to tell me, always very welcome of anyone's experiences or personal anecdotes. But overall, if you found this video because you're doing up your own Triumph Sprint ST or a similar bike, I hope the video was useful. And yeah, take it steady, take it easy, and check everything. Check twice, cut once. For braking systems, that's really the way to go. So good luck with everything. Happy motorcycling.